Everyone, and welcome to PsychCentral.com and a live recording of the Psych Central Podcast. My name is Gabe Howard, and I am your host, and we want to talk to the Facebook audience for a moment before we actually start recording live. So just real quick, I want to give the Facebook group a quick introduction to my guest, Okpara Rice. Okpara, wave!
Hello, everybody.
The way this is going to work is in a couple seconds here, we're going to start recording this podcast live. And that's it. We're going to be live. When we do this on stage, we ask the audience to cheer as loud as humanly possible so that on the recording, everybody can hear us. Now, I don't know if we can get loud enough that all the way in Iowa and Ohio, our microphones will pick it up. But if you are so inspired, when we go live, just start cheering like crazy. Make sense? I'm still sitting here expecting them to answer, Okpara. I don't know.
You might be waiting a while. Okay.
Especially since it's like a 30-second delay from when we're talking to when it actually goes live on Facebook. But are you ready to get started officially, Mr. Rice?
I am ready, of course.
All right. Let me line everything up. Start all my magical recorders. Hang on 1 second. Over to recorder number 1. Okpara, I've got your recorder on, a little behind the scenes, nice juicy bubbles there. And here we go. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Psych Central Podcast. We are recording live on Facebook. And for this special recording, we have Okpara Rice with us. Now, Okpara Rice joined Tanginger Place of Cedar Rapids, Iowa in July of 2013 and assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer in July of 2015. Now, Okpara is the first African American to hold executive office at Tanginger Place in its more than 140-year history. He also holds a Bachelor of Science in Social Work from Loyola University in Chicago, Illinois, and he has a Master's of Social Work from Washington University from St. Louis, Missouri. Okpara lives in Marion, Iowa with his wife, Julie, and sons, Malcolm and Dylan. Okpara, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to be with you again, Gabe. It's good to see you, man.
I am super excited for you to be here. But I have to say, I wish that you could be here under better circumstances. There's a lot going on in our country right now that have necessitated conversations that frankly should have happened centuries ago, absolutely decades ago, and it's really putting a spotlight on them. And you brought to my attention that there's a lot of trauma involved in racism. Now something that I had never really considered. I want to state unequivocally, I think that racism is wrong and that it's bad. And a month ago at this time, I would have thought that I understood what was going on. And I'm starting to realize that I may understand a skosh, but I don't understand a lot. And you suggested opening up just an open dialogue to talk about racism, race relations, and the trauma that you've been through. And I want to say, I appreciate you being willing to do so because it's a tough conversation.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, man, being open to it. And just the fact, I have always appreciated your friendship and being a colleague and knowing that what we have to do for our society is to have conversations with each other, to be vulnerable and not be afraid to ask questions of each other. If we don't do that, we're not going to learn. We're not going to gain another perspective, and it's definitely not going to help us move the community forward. So I just appreciate you having me today and look forward to the dialogue.
Well, again, thank you so much for being here. All right, well, let's get started. Okpara, why do you think that racism is still an issue?
Man, that's a way to jump right in there, Gabe. I got to tell you, because we've never really dealt with it as a country. We continue to, as we've evolved as a country, right? We try to think we continue to make advancements, but there are some fundamental things that we have not really addressed. Brian Stevenson down down south, who runs the Equal Justice Initiative, was speaking about this a couple of years ago around how we have never come to reconciliation, even around slavery, around lynching. There are things that are just really uncomfortable for us as a society to talk about. And what we know is that there's been systems built for 100 years, right? You go back to the beginning of slavery, you go further than that, around making sure people are disenfranchised. And so we have these very concrete systems that are entrenched in the very fabric of our society to make sure that some segments, African-American segments in particular, and I'm an African-American, but there are other segments too, on socioeconomic levels, that people don't get ahead, and they're designed that way. And so it is very hard to go back and look at how we are built as a country, right? From the roots of slavery and someone else's labor to build wealth. And then to go back and think about where we are today. And so until we really address those core issues of who we are and how we evolved as a country and reconcile some of that painful history, I don't know if we're gonna get there. I will tell you though, I am hopeful. I have never in my life, 46 years old, seen as much conversation as I have right now. And you think about all the horrific incidents that have happened, even over just the last decade, there's something that really just resonated all of a sudden. And so now, I mean, think about it. I got an email the other day from PetSmart telling me Black Lives Matter. Like, what is going on, right? And so, again, nothing has changed. What changed is we watched another Black man die, and it just was the tipping point. And I think that these conversations are critical, and it's going to bring about some reform. I hope it bring about some reform. And let's not forget, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so people feel as strongly as possible right now and are out there marching and protesting in the middle of a pandemic. So that should tell you that this is a conversation whose time has come and well overdue.
One of the things that I thought was interesting is that Will Smith said that racism hasn't changed and police misconduct hasn't changed and treatment of African Americans hasn't changed. We're just starting to record it because of cell phone cameras and he feels, and I'm not trying to take his platform, but he feels very strongly that this has been going on since pretty much the beginning of America, and we're just now able to get it televised in a way that people can respond to. I know that this has been happening in my lifetime. I grew up learning about Dr. King. And one of the things that I thought about, especially in preparation for our show, is, I can think of a lot of people who have been arrested in civil disobedience and in protesting and in trying to move a message forward. And history shows that they did nothing wrong. They weren't breaking any laws. This was just police overreach, police misconduct, where they were arrested for literally no reason. None of them are white. I couldn't find an example in America of a white person going to prison for 6, 12, 18 months for breaking no law. And I was also a little bit sad to discover that we sort of hold these up as an example of heroism. Taking Dr. King, he was in he wrote the book, Tales from a Birmingham jail when he was in jail in Alabama. We're like, look what he did. Look at this amazing thing. He made lemonades out of lemons. But how do you feel about the headline not being law-abiding African-American man put in jail for doing nothing wrong? And we're still talking about police reform, and this literally happened in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, we have been talking about, I had the pleasure of meeting Adam Foss a few years ago. And Adam is a former prosecutor out of Boston who has been talking about prosecutorial reform for years. And, the criminal justice, the new Jim Crow, right? Michelle Alexander's book, these things are out there. What happens is that we just have not been paying attention. I was at a meeting the other day with some folks in town, and I said to them, nothing has changed. The data has been there. What we know around the disproportionality in criminal justice system, disproportionality in how the education is funded and housing and access to wealth, that has not changed. That data has been there. The reality is that we have not paid attention to it for some odd reason collectively as a society. And so when we look at, when you talk about the news and how, Black men are portrayed, or even people who are protesting, none of it really surprises me, right? Because that's not a fun story to say, protester who was doing nothing arrested, right? It doesn't really matter when we're saying, we have someone who might have done a minor crime who is basically murdered in cold blood with a video camera pointing directly at them, And still that didn't make the police officer move or feel like he had anything he needed to correct. And so that says a lot about who we are as a society. And I think that is a real breaking point. And remember, we just had also Breonna Taylor, that situation happened down in Kentucky. And then Ahmaud Arbery, also that just happened where two men decide they can do a citizen's arrest for a guy that's jogging. So it just says that we have got to open dialogue and look at addressing these things head on and calling a spade. And that is hard for people to do. And if we think that the media, whoever is going to, their job is to sell papers, right, to get viewership. And so those things that are the most inflammatory is always what's going to hit there, right? So if you look at just recently, even just all the news coverage around the rioters and the looters, right, you think like just absolute chaos. But it didn't really talk about the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are out there just marching and protesting peacefully of all, creeds and colors, right? So it just says like, you go to the lowest common denominator because that's what seems to grab people's attention, but that doesn't make it right. And so some of those stories still have not been told.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, and I promise I have a question, but one of the things I thought was interesting, it said the protesters are looting. Well, isn't it the looters who are looting? I mean, it's a little bit disingenuous, right? I mean, it struck me as odd that there is this belief that everybody is always acting in concert. Now, we can't, as a mental health advocate, I can't get all mental health advocates to act in concert with one another. There's lots of infighting and disagreement in the mental health community. Now, you are a CEO of an organization, and I imagine that you and your employees are not always in lockstep. There's disagreements, there's closed door meetings, and you obviously have a human resources department because you have to fire people, and everybody understands this. But yet, in the collective consciousness of America, people are like, okay, all the protesters got together, they had a meeting at Denny's, and here's what they all decided to do. And this sort of becomes the narrative. And that really leads me to my next question about the media. Do you feel that the media speaks about African Americans in a fair way, a positive or negative way? I know you kind of said it a little bit when you said it's their job to, but listen, as a white male, the only time I ever feel that the media is unfair to me is when they talk about mental illness. The rest of the time, I feel that they're representing me in a glowing, positive light. How do you feel about the media's role in all of this?
When you look at as an African-American male, right, first of all, people see us as this threat no matter what, right? That's just sort of a given. And so we have seen, and it was actually not that long ago, I forgot who did the study, was when you look at two of the same infractions, right? Though if it was a white person doing the same infraction, they'd put up a picture of them like in their prep school or like high school picture looking all young and fresh, right? And if it was an African-American person who got arrested for something, what they would portray them as like the worst possible picture you can find to make them look the part. And I think they actually did this with Michael Brown down in Ferguson also after he got killed, right? And so that's just, again, it plays into the narrative that we are scary. We're big, we're scary, we're loud, and people should be afraid of us. And so this sort of gets perpetuated. It has gotten perpetuated in movies, it gets perpetuated on film. And things have gotten, better because people are standing up and saying, there's a lot of Black excellence in this country. Not everybody is a criminal, right? Not every African-American person. There are millions of hardworking, wonderful African-American, professionals out there who are just taking care of their families, being great fathers, being great moms, right? Those are the stories that need to be out there. Those stories are not as sexy though, right? That's not as sexy as saying, oh my God, we're looking at some guy running down the street after he grabbed a TV from Target, right? Running down the street, instead of saying, oh my God, there were whole communities that came out together, put masks on, and is marching for civil justice, right? And marching for social justice. That's a different type of story. Though I do feel like some journalists who are on the ground are trying to do a better job of telling that story because we have to demand that story is told. And so that's a piece of it. But we also know that the media is under target, right? Newspapers are dying across the country. We know that the larger scale, media is owned by large corporations. And so,
Right.
again, it comes back to different metrics that are being used. And so, I hope that local media continues to be able to tell those stories in those communities, because that is, really important. That people do see others who are and who are being positive, to break that sort of stereotype that that we're all waiting to break into somebody's house, right? It's like birth of the nation type stuff, man.
One of the things that to give a little context, I really try to stay in the middle, both because of the people that I interview, and I feel that moderation is key. I tend to feel that either extreme of the debate is just that, it's an extreme. I've often said, I don't know that this is a heroes versus villains scenario. I don't think that anybody's the good guy and anybody's the bad guy. And I say all that because I maintain excellent relationships with police through the CIT program. Now CIT is the mental health program for crisis intervention, because in America, if I live with bipolar disorder, and if I am in crisis, somebody will call the police, and even if they do call 911, they're not going to send a social worker or a doctor. They're going to send a police officer. And I've asked a lot of police officers how they feel about this. And I was surprised by some of the unfortunately off-the-record responses that I got. And one person said, look, people hate us now, but I'm not surprised, because we were raised on this idea that if you see something wrong, it's representative of the entire group. We've stoked that fire and we've raised it, and we've been okay with it. We've been okay with, we see something in the Black community that we don't like, it's representative of the entire community, and then we just moved on with our day. Well, now all of a sudden people are starting to see something that they don't like in policing or law enforcement, and we've decided, that must be everybody, and well, that's what we are trained to believe. I can't imagine, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Okpara, I can't imagine that you believe that every single police officer is bad. I've worked with you on CIT before, so I know that you don't feel that way, but how do you handle that?
I want to reframe it for you just a little bit.
Please.
And people say, well, why are African Americans so frustrated about the police? Because we've been telling you these things that have been happening for decades. Right? Yeah. So when you have been saying the same thing over and over again, and then people realize, like, oh, wait a minute, this actually is a thing. It's kind of infuriating, right? Of course, not every police officer is horrible. I have a good relationship with the police chief here. Of course not. But we cannot deny that there is a fundamental systems problem that has to be addressed in policing and criminal justice. It just cannot be denied. The data is there. And so, again, we continue to want to have again, that's how people like to divide us, right? It gets us on this whole, you must hate them. They're not good. It's not about that. It's about the system that has been holding people down. And you have disproportionality in the criminal justice system for the same, felonies, misdemeanors, whatever, that a white counterpart would have. African Americans, drastically, statistically, are way out of proportion with the population. So, those are things that cannot fundamentally be denied. And this has been going on for decade after decade after decade. And so, I talked to some officers, and again, there are good people. That's a tough job. I've never been a police officer. I have no idea what that experience is like. But it is very hard when you look on TV, and once again, we'll go back to the media, when you see people, when you're protesting for brutality, and then you see police officers beating up on people protesting for brutality. You can't control that narrative, right? Even in the last week, there have been officers across the country been arrested for assault and all kind of other things, right? So that's just happened. So these things are real. And so it's not that people hate police. People hate a system that disenfranchises whole segments of society. And so that's the issue. And that's what has to be addressed. That's why reforms can't happen if a community and a city and everybody's a part of it don't come to the table and say, we collectively believe this is wrong. And that's how you have change.
One of the things that I've noticed is, and there are so many examples of this, I couldn't even find a good one to use, but one of the things that keeps being said is, it's just a few bad apples. It's just a few bad apples. It's just a few bad apples. But, for example, in the case of the few bad apples that pushed a 75-year-old man and cracked his skull open, the 57 people quit, to, I don't know, show solidarity that they should be allowed to shove elderly people for, I don't know, back talking, I guess. So we have the bad actors, we have the bad apples. We'll leave that sit there, that they did the pushing. But why did the other officers feel the need to stand up and say, no, we want to protect our right to push? That takes away from this idea that it's only a few bad apples if everybody is propping up those apples. And you know, not for nothing, nobody ever finishes that quote. It's a few bad apples spoil the barrel. And if you're not removing those apples, I know that's a long way of saying, do you feel that part of the problem is that nobody is holding the bad actors accountable, and that the police sort of close ranks to protect the people that are maybe doing things that are, well, dangerous?
You know, Gabe, I would say, again, I'm not a police expert, right? This is my one perspective as growing up in my skin and my experience. Every organization, every industry, every business has a culture to it, right? So those who are policemen know what the police culture is like, know what is expected of each other, right? Know what the blue wall is, right? We've had that conversation. There's books and articles written about that. I don't know if people want to cover for that. I don't know if that's saying, hey, we believe it's okay to shove a 75-year-old guy down. I'm sure most of them wouldn't want that. If you think about, would they want that for their own mom or their own dad? But the conversation, again, when we lose sight of the conversation, it's about what do they think is okay use of force, right? That's why a lot of what is going on around policy reform is talking about what is an okay use of force, and having some agreement about when you become aggressive, what that is supposed to look like, so that there is a social agreement with everyone saying this is what's okay. When I saw the video of the guy get knocked down and everybody sort of looked at him and then sort of kept it moving, I was like, God, that's just cold, right?
Yeah.
Something, but I wasn't there. I don't know the dynamics. And from the outside, I'm saying that's just crazy to me. But those people who decided to step off of that, they have to attune for themselves and their own morality and their own ethics. But that's a conversation amongst law enforcement that I think they have to have, because they have their own culture. I am not of that culture, so I can't speak to what it is like to be an officer. But it'd be fascinating to know and be a fly in the wall of a room with officers behind closed doors saying, no, I'd be shocked to see anybody say, God, that was good. No, because most officers you talk to off the record say that's nonsense, and we can't do this. We know we need to get better. So, but it's just going to have that collective voice, man. And that I don't know.
I really appreciate your candor, and I appreciate you saying that you don't understand. You haven't walked a mile in law enforcement shoes, and it is one of the hats that I try to wear when I do this, because listen, based on what I've seen in the past few years, and especially what I've seen in the last 10 days, it's difficult not to just have this knee-jerk reaction of, why is this okay? Why have we tolerated this? And when you start to look at the research and the facts and figures, and then when I start talking to my African-American friends, like you, Okpara, thank you for your candor, I realize I am not afraid of the police. I could not find one minority, I could not find one non-white person who said that they weren't afraid of the police. And I don't know what the solution is. I'm not even sure I understand the problem, but I know a lot of people, and that's very striking to me that every single non-white person that I met was like, look, Gabe, between me and you, no, I'm terrified of them. And that's gotta suck if you're law enforcement. But listen, that's really got to suck if you're not white. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, you think every time I leave my house and jump in the car, a traffic stop can lead to my death.
Yeah.
Like, that's just every black man in society, every black woman. I mean, think about the numbers of examples, right? This was not new. I don't speak for all black people. Again, as you have these conversations with people, I am imploring people who are listening to this, watching this, go have a conversation with somebody who does not look like you and ask them about their experience. Ask them about, have they ever faced what it's like to be stopped by a police officer, knowing if you use your hands the wrong way, you may get shot. I have had, Gabe, in my life since I was 14, I've had guns in my face at least 3 or 4 times at the hands of officers. And I wasn't doing anything wrong in those times, right? Again, I grew up in Chicago. I'm thinking that's just the way it is, right? We've always had a kind of an oppositional relationship with the police in some ways, right? So again, when I leave the house, I know if I don't prepare my sons for how to interact with police, they could wind up dead. And there's not a mom who has raised an African American child in this country who does not have that same fear. That's what we live with. That is the weight that is on our shoulders. Think about what that does to you emotionally over time, over and over and over again. I was talking to my mom the other day, and I said, what was it like, like seeing me being 17, running the streets, and her saying, I always wondered if you would come home alive or not. And I don't, that has not changed. Again, I am 46 years old, and there are moms today who are sending their kids out in the community who are having those same exact thoughts. So again, I'm not pro put down law enforcement. That's not who I am. I think everybody needs to be at the table, but this is a time for everybody to do a little bit of soul searching about why they are the way they are. What is the culture that they have? What is the culture around policing and use of force? And come into some agreements of saying, maybe that needs to evolve with society because we can't keep going this way.
I can tell you're passionate about it because you're like banging the desk.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I want people to know when they listen back to this, on the show, you can, because we're doing a live episode, and when you've got the video, you can see Okpara, pounding the desk. When we listen to this back on the podcast without it, that banging is Okpara feeling like I'm looking into your eyes, and there's this part of me that just wants to hug you and say that this can't be. Because I have heard, just like every other white person has heard, that America's fair, we're all treated equally, and however we end up, based on our own hard work and dedication and stuff. And listen, some of the things that help reinforce that are when I meet people like you, Okpara. You have a master's degree. Like, I'm jealous of you. You're the CEO of a nonprofit organization. You wield a lot of influence and power. You are very well educated. You have a beautiful wife and children. Your house is bigger than mine. So when somebody says, hey, people in the African American community aren't treated fair, I think about my African American friends, and I think, well, he's doing better than me, and suddenly that turns off a switch in my mind that I don't need to pay attention anymore. Yeah. And I imagine that's like very traumatic for you because your success has helped make good people. Because I hate to call myself a good person, but I feel strongly that I'm a good guy. You wouldn't be friends with a bad person, but your success has now made me unintentionally turn a blind eye to the plight of minorities in this country, because I figured, well, if Okpara can do it, anybody can.
I am so glad you said that. But that, I got to tell you, I'm so glad you said that. First of all, I think we need to establish a couple things right now from the get-go. Nothing is fair and equal. We have got to stop pretending that things are fair and equal. People pick up a book, read an article, and you learn about redlining, learn about how wealth has been kept out of African American community, learn about how opportunities have been kept out of African American communities, learn about how education has systematically been stripped in African American communities for excellence, right? We've got to understand that the playing field is not equal by any means stretch of the imagination. So if you are poor or if you are a person of color, you are already starting from behind. So people look at us, right, and say, "Oh, God, you really made it, right? Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, but I had to work twice as hard to get here, right?" My mom told me when I was a kid, I've got to be 2 times smarter than the average white person to be able to succeed in life. She wasn't wrong. And people don't like to admit that or have those conversations because the myth of, hey, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and it's all going to be good, it's just not true. It's a lot of work. And you know what? It's also very easy to lose because there's always people who believe you don't belong there in the first place. And we don't like to talk about it and we don't like to admit it. But when I talk to my Black colleagues around the country and even around the world, right, that we all have the same experience. You know, at the moment you walk into a place or walk into a room or walk into a boardroom, there are people in there who don't believe you belong, that you are not smart enough, that you do not have the business acumen to make good decisions. And that's just one microcosm of the world that I live in. So, yeah, I am very proud of what I've been able to accomplish, but also worked really hard to get here. And what I want to see people understand is that it shouldn't be like you got to jump above and through every type of hoop imaginable. Our kids, our future is making sure the playing field is level. That's the future. It should not. My kids, because they have a mom and a dad who have a master's degree, shouldn't get any more advantage than the single mom having to work two jobs to care for herself and her children. They should have the same advantages. They should have the same opportunities in life. And we've got to stop pretending that everybody does, because they don't.
One of the things that I never noticed about society, and I was, when I bought my first house, Okpara, one of the things that somebody told me is, hey, this is in a great school district. And when I bought my second house, after I sold the first one, I don't want people thinking I own a whole bunch of houses, they said, hey, this is in a great school district. And you're noticing a pattern. When my friends bought houses, great school district, great. And we're all proud of ourselves because we all worked hard and we all bought houses in great school districts. But it then occurred to me that in order to have a great school district, you have to have a bad school district.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a school district that isn't providing the things that I guess make it a great school district. And when all of us become 18, some of us graduated from a great school district and some of us graduated from a school district that was not great. We're all now on the same playing field at 18. And I just want to put that out there as an example because it's kind of a small thing, right? We both people at 18 went to school, have a high school diploma, and are now ready to start their lives. But one person went to a great school district and one person went to, I guess, the one where the realtor says the house is cozy. I think there's just a ton of examples like that have been pointed out to me in the last month. They've been pointed out to me, frankly, all of my life. I've just chosen to ignore them because I believe that hard work and dedication would get me there. Okpara, we've talked a lot. We've talked a lot about how the world is not fair, how you had to work twice as hard, how your relationship with the police is different from mine. Let's talk about all the trauma that has caused, because that's one of the things that you said to me in preparation for this episode, that it's very traumatic knowing that your country, well, frankly, feels not good about you. You literally said that this was traumatizing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, man, it is. I want people to understand and to realize, right? Because we become so desensitized to images. I took my sons a couple of years ago to the new African American Smithsonian Museum in DC. And me and my wife have made a commitment to make sure, right, that our kids are exposed to understanding who they are. And there's an exhibit there. If people haven't been there, I highly encourage them to go. It is an amazing museum. Tough to, it's tough. It makes you take a little, gut check on some things. But we turned the corner, and I remember being next to my son, and there was an exhibit of an image of lynching, and having a discussion with them about what lynching is. And I remember my son asking me, "Why are all the people standing around watching?" And think about that image that gets burned in, right? Now, again, I'm a grown man. These are images I've seen my entire life, right? And I grew up on the south side of Chicago, where you would even have, at least schools would even talk about the civil rights movement and slavery. Flash forward, I live in Iowa now. Civil rights are hardly talked about in the schools here at all. I have this battle every year with the school district to talk about what are they going to bring into the classroom. And so, it is something that you got to think about. What are those images? We literally just watched a man die, right?
Yeah.
We all collectively as a society just watched a man die. We go back to the Tamir Rice video, even from Cleveland, right? They even showed that. So because we do have all these little phones in our pockets, on our Aubrey, we just watched all those things happen. And think about what that does to our psyche. I'm a social worker by trade, right? And so you think about clinically what it does to you, or having people tell you and reinforce images of you're not worthy or your life doesn't have value, right? And then we wonder why people act out. Where you basically treat them like animals, right? And then when they rebel or fight back, it just perpetuates the very thing you think about them already. And so that is what is happening to the Black community. So there's a collective sadness and exhaustion When I watched that video, I'm like, Jesus Christ, another guy? Like, seriously? And I'm watching that video. You go and I don't, and it's like disaster porn in a way. I don't want people like to understand what they're watching. It's not just about that. Look at the face of the officer. He didn't have a damn care in the world kneeling on that man's neck.
And it's important to understand that he knew that he was on video. I think that maybe that's why this one, and it's sad to say it this way, but I think maybe this is why this one was the flashpoint. Because one, it was a very long time. It was 8.5 minutes. There were other police officers around. There were first responders that gave him a warning. And of course, he knew that he was being filmed. And as the majority of my friends say, if this is how you act when you know people are watching, what are you doing when people are not? And I hate to ask the question again, Okpara. I'm asking you and only you, how did that make you feel?
Sad. I mean, it's sad. It's because you have to sit down, and again, with my kids, and explain why a guy who's already handcuffed, laying on the ground, winds up dead. How does a guy like Freddie Gray wind up in the back of a paddy wagon and has his neck and his spine, snapped? How does that happen? Right? And so it's harder and harder to answer that question because there is evil in the world and people do evil things. And so for me, it is exhausting and it is tiring, hands down. And I was sad because you have another life that is brutally taken for no reason, right? No reason. And it just becomes exhausting watching another Black brother die at the hands of people who don't give a damn about our lives. And that's not okay. And then you have the anger with it and saying, what is it going to take? What is it going to take for people to understand this has to stop? Something happened. I can't put my finger on it. Something happened that collectively as a society, like around the country, around the world, people are like, wait a minute. Okay. This is it. And so what you do is, who knows what starts a movement, what starts that rallying cry? I have no idea. I'm just going to appreciate that it has started, and this man's life will have meaning far beyond the years he spent on this earth, because he may save someone else's life and not even realize it. Well, he won't realize it because he's dead.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh at just the way that you said it. I have so many questions, and I feel, again, thank you for being so honest. I mean, you're doing this live. You don't even get a retake, so I sincerely appreciate that. My next question has to do with the country. Like you said, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We spent a lot of time watching the news, and we watched white people carrying AK-47s storm the Capitol, disobey police, walk into a building with, again, semi-automatic weapons. To be fair, they were carrying legally, but with semi-automatic weapons, they disobeyed police and went into a Capitol building that housed that state's governor. No arrests. And then, a month later, we see African Americans protesting for equal treatment, for fair treatment, after on video being traumatized by an 8.5-minute death of somebody that they can really relate to, somebody that I don't want to say because he was black, but they look like they understood. That's the message that I'm getting. And because of those protests, rubber bullets, gas, pepper spray, just dozens upon dozens of arrests. How does it make you feel to know that if you were a white guy, you could storm the Capitol with a semi-automatic weapon where the governor was and not even get arrested? But as an African American protesting the police misconduct, you will be arrested. What does that do internally?
Man, let's go back. Let's just talk about the Michigan protests, right? Because I have said this to a lot of friends, and it's not a joke, but it's kind of funny. If it was a group of brothers walked in there with AK-47s and walked in the Capitol, what do you think would have happened at the end of that? Do you think that would have been a peaceful protest? Do you really think that that's how that would have went down? No, you would have had a lot of black men dead at the hands of police. I'm sorry. It is, again, we keep pretending that the rules for one is the same, the rules for all, and it's just not. That is reality. You look on stories, people even right now standing there, protesters with their guns out, trying to use intimidation tactics. What if we use those same tactics? So ask yourself, why don't we use those tactics? There are plenty of black gun owners in this country, because we know if we step there and we go there, we are going to be dead, and that is not going to help anybody carry that message. So again, it is not equal. It is not the same. And we have to stop pretending that it is and call a spade. And that's the reality. So of course it's going to be met with rubber bullets and whatever when we have this power and law, like we got to, we're trying to come down hard and be tough sort of thing. Like, yeah, okay, that's not a surprise, but let's not pretend that is exactly the same.
And how does that? I'm really desperately trying to avoid the phrase "and how does that make you feel?" But Okpara, you have to make your way in this world too, and you have literally just described white privilege, systemic racism, unfair treatment. I mean, these are all things that I'm not you, and I am angry on your behalf. How do you feel? How does it make you feel? What kind of trauma is this causing? How does it influence your day-to-day decisions?
I will tell you this, because the other thing we haven't even talked about is we're in the midst of a pandemic where it's also disproportionately affecting African Americans, right? So there's a lot of things happening in society. I went down to a rally that we had in Cedar Rapids with my sons and my wife, and we're a blended family. We're an interracial family, and again, it was important for us that our kids be there and hear and be a part of that. And what I saw, hands down, we had a very mixed crowd, and there were people who was as outraged as I was about what was happening, if not more so, and vocal about it. And I was thinking, all right, we might get something done. So I'm going to say, as pissed as I am about everything that has happened, and it is happening and has continued to happen, I'm actually kind of encouraged because maybe it woke some people up to understand, yeah, we weren't just talking about, this at the side of our neck. Yeah, there's a such thing as white privilege. There is inequalities in society. And God, doesn't Colin Kaepernick feel pretty justified right about now? He was talking about this. Look how you got blackballed. So he's got to feel pretty damn good. Right? So the reality is people are waking up to understanding that, okay, this isn't right. But this is just one tip of a much larger policy dialogue we need to have about how communities of color in particular have been held down by all of these systems. And that's the part of the conversation. This is police reform, criminal justice reform is just one part of a much larger policy debate we need to have to empower these communities to come forward. That's the part that can't get lost. We absolutely need to march and deal with this, but we also have to deal with these other issues that people also have just waken up to, that this is also issues in society that have to be dealt with.
Okpara, it's a lot. It's overwhelming for me. I want to be clear. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I'm not saying my life has been easy. I live with bipolar disorder. My biological father abandoned me. I mean, I've certainly been through some stuff, but that's all starting to look real reasonable in the midst of everything that I'm learning and that you and I have talked about. All I can think right now is like you're a dad. You have two children, and you've been telling this story so far as this is a learning opportunity. I want to educate my children. I want them to grow up to be good men. And listen, you are a good dad. I want to say that those are all good things. But seriously, now the kids are in bed, the door's closed, you're just laying there. How do you feel about having brought children into the world that you just described? Does that weigh heavily on you?
Oh man, I look at it as an opportunity. And I'll say about my kids in particular. My oldest son is named Malcolm. We named him after Malcolm X. And my younger son is named Dylan Thurgood, and he's named after Thurgood Marshall. They carry that weight, right? We talk about these things in my house a lot. They understand that they're namesakes and what they gave for this country. And so they understand it. So they're a little bit unique, right? We talk about this stuff all the time. And I would say to you, and I'm saying this as friends, because it's only just me and you talking. I'm sure there's nobody listening to this or watching this or anything. So I'm just saying.
I don't have a popular show at all.
I'm just saying this. But the model that we all have in my house, and my kids have bracelets, and this is what we talk about. It's a Bob Marley quote for those who like Bob Marley: "Is I don't come to bow, I come to conquer." And that's the mindset that you have to have. Society is going to continue to throw things at you. They're going to continue to put obstacles up for your success. You're either going to lay down and let it happen, or you're going to conquer those things. And that's the attitude we're trying to raise our sons with. And understanding and be very honest, right, that they also are coming from a life of privilege. They don't know what it's like to be hungry. They don't know what it's like not to go to a good school. They don't know what it's like to be surrounded by violence in their community. So they are already, again, starting with the leg up. But we remind them that they are starting already on third base. So they can't hit a single and think they hit a home run. No, brother, it doesn't work that way. So you have paid those things on the sacrifices of other people. And so I wouldn't be here if there weren't people who believed in me along the way, but I know I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people who are pioneers who laid the path. I'll tell you one experience I had with my kids is when we went to Washington for that trip I told you about. I had reached out to Congressman John Lewis's office, and I thought, God, it'd be awesome to be able to meet him while we're there and have my kids meet him. And unfortunately, he wasn't in town. But his chief of staff was like, "Hey, man, come on through and visit the office." So we went over to his office, and inside of it was just like a living museum of just, oh my God, just pictures of him with every possible leader you can imagine going back from the 60s, right? And so, and my sons just sit there and watched in awe and understood, yeah, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Right now, I am standing watching these young people who are out there protesting and all these folks, and I'm in awe of them because they are taking that advocacy the same way that's been the part of who we are for a long, long time. And they're taking that. What I want to see happen is that we take that advocacy and we move it into policy and broad policy. And I think we can do that. And so for me, my kids unfortunately get to hear this a lot, almost on a daily basis, around these issues because we don't run from it. And what happened in Charlottesville, we stopped and we talked about that. We talk about hate. We talk about what is the Klan. We talk about disparities in education and why it means, why is it important to vote? We talk about those things. And so, and we also talk about, you know what? You are also being hunted, and you got to understand that it isn't equal. And that there are people who are going to always see you as a threat, light skinned or not, you're still going to be seen as a threat. And so nobody's going to say, oh, look at those biracial or Rice boys. In the eyes of this country, you are a black male, and don't forget it and don't fool yourself. So we were very honest with our kids about where life is at.
Mr. Rice, I still just have to say, though, you are an excellent CEO and an excellent social worker, and you are excellent at so many things. But forget about all of that. You are the father of children that you just described as being hunted. I can't even imagine what it's like to go to sleep at night after having said those words. What's the dad answer?
I'm going to say the dad answer and what we know about who we are as African Americans, Gabe, we are a resilient people. I mean, we have had everything thrown at us and then some, but we're resilient. We're still here. We're still fighting. We're still fighting for what we know is right. That is, of course, I go to bed afraid, but I also know that part of my responsibility is to raise them to be as strong as they possibly can and to be able to deal with whatever this world and this society throws at them. And that's what you do, man. You don't give up hope, right? Because the anger just eats away at you. Anger isn't going to get, that doesn't help anything. That just plays into what people think about us already, right? The angry black man syndrome, right? That just plays into that whole stereotype. But what we have to do is to be strategic and be calculated. That's how you bring about change. And then when we are resilient, that is for sure. And again, everything that has been thrown at the African Americans from the time they arrived on these shores, and we are still here and still thriving. Hey, that says something, man. We have to celebrate that resiliency.
One of the things that I keep seeing all the time is, the Black Lives Matter movement rose up. The Black Lives, my mouth is dry. I apologize. The Black Lives Matter movement rose up in response to police misconduct and law enforcement overreach and things of that nature. And when it first came up, I was like, okay, well, this is good. I am a mental health advocate, so I know a little something about advocacy. And then all of a sudden people started yelling, all lives matter. Now, I've been a mental health advocate at this point for 15 years. Whenever I said we need to help people with severe and persistent mental illness, nobody came up to me and said, we need to help people with cancer. We need to help people with all illnesses. Like I've never seen this before. Now, I don't want to fall into a quagmire of why this is a stupid thing to say, because nobody is saying only Black Lives Matter. I understand that. But this is the first time, at least in my 43 years on this planet, that I've ever seen a movement try to raise awareness and education and draw attention to an issue that was ever criticized for having done so in the first place. How traumatic is that for you that you can't even discuss the issue without being told that apparently you dislike all the other humans on the planet? I can't even fathom.
Yeah, man, but it's all smoke and mirrors, man. Like, it's just another way to try to divide people away from the core issue. No one is saying Black Lives Matter and everybody else's life doesn't matter. Like, nobody, it's not even rational to say that, right? But what the reality is saying we are dying at the hands of people who are supposed to be protecting us, right? We have systems of oppression that have been rooted in this country from the beginning. So there is nothing wrong with saying, hey, our lives do matter, damn it. And I'm sorry, I keep cursing, Gabe. I know you told me not to.
Yeah, no, dude.
But,
damn it, it's okay.
But it does matter. And saying, and that's all it's saying, and putting your hand, your foot down in the sand and saying, we are not disposable in society. As much as people may want to believe that we are not disposable. Our lives matter. It doesn't mean that nobody else's lives matter. Doesn't mean any of that. It's not, you don't have to put up one to put somebody else down. It is a false narrative that I think is being perpetuated to keep people apart of what the core issue. The difference is, I don't know if it's going to fly this time. I'm not sure people are hearing it. I really don't. And so I think that maybe a few years ago, because then we had all the other lives matter, and everybody had one, right? And then I think people are coming to realize, oh, I really do start to understand what they're talking about. Oh my God, I am starting to see this. You had just a minute ago, you had one of the folks watching this say it's almost like sending our kids to a war zone every day. That's the mentality Black parents have to have. Like that's reality. And so, yeah, we want to stop this. We want our kids to thrive in a society where they are valued and feel worthy and don't have to worry about being hunted every day or being misconstrued when you go into a store or being disrespected just because people don't feel they're worthy or smart. So, I don't even, get into that all lives matter debate because I think it's just silly and people are just trying to divide us because that's what's convenient and easy to do.
Okpara, you're a strong person. I do sincerely look up to you. I always have. That's how we met as mental health advocates. That we have worked together. There's no asterisk at the end of that. But I can't help but notice that in Gabe Howard's personal circle, all of the African American people I know are strong people. They're extraordinarily strong. You're not my only friend with a master's degree who is a member of the African American community. I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are just way smarter and way better educated than I am. Mm-hmm. What do you have to say to the people who aren't as strong as you? Not everybody is born innately as strong as Okpara Rice or has a good family. And that's not, I just mean, not everybody's family, like you said, is equipped to send them to the best schools or to travel to Washington, D.C. and get a chief of staff to show them the photo album of a congressman. We all come from different walks of lives, but I still get back to not everybody is as strong as Okpara Rice. What about them?
Oh man, I would say to you this, and again, this is me talking to my friend. There are a lot of people who are a hell of a lot stronger than me, right? Again, I worked really hard to get where I'm at, but you know what? I have a profound respect for people who may be on the lower socioeconomic spectrum, right? who take $1 and make it into 20, right? Because that's where I came from. My father was a drug addict. We lost everything we had. I know what it's like to live on the margin. Those people have a strength you cannot even imagine. See, that's what it is that we pretend just because we've made it and we go, like, oh yeah, we got a nice car and got a nice house. We must be great. There are people out there who may not have anything who are some of the best teachers on the planet. There are people out there who don't have anything, who have a strength we could not even know. I don't know. I can go to Walgreens and not worry about having a dog attack me, or I can go to a restaurant and not have to worry I got to sit in back or jump on the bus, right? Think about that's strength, man. That's the part. It is, again, I'm not special. There are people out there, they just don't have a voice. They just don't have the platform to speak out. But don't fool yourself into thinking, no, there's a lot of strong people who are in these communities, who are impoverished, who do amazing things, not only for each other, for each other's children, for each other's families. And we have to, again, celebrate that resiliency and that strength. It's not relative. And that is what makes, I think, the African-American community really, really special, because we all have a relative story about where we began at. And we all, I believe anyway, understand that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And so, just because you made it don't mean you have more strength than somebody else, man.
Okpara, we're nearing the end of the show, and I have so many notes that I just didn't get to, and there's just some things that I want to hit you with real quick. I did some research on just like common myths because I was curious as to whether or not they were true. And spoiler alert, everybody, they're not true. One of them was that the majority of people on welfare are minorities. Yeah, it turns out that's not true. The majority of people on welfare are white. There's just a ton of white people on welfare, but we seem to think that it's always the minority community that's on welfare. The next thing was African Americans fathers are largely absent. Yeah, it turns out that no, not really a significantly higher rate than Caucasian fathers. And this one, my biological father abandoned me, when I was 0. So I just really don't like deadbeat dads, period. But this is one of these myths that just seems to persist and persist and persist and persist and persist. It was shocking to me the number of things that America believes is a fact that turned out not to be factual at all. And I'm going to ask you probably for the last time, how does it feel knowing that some of the hate that is thrust at you is based on nonsense? Another way that I can ask the question is, we all have the same president, and we have all heard the president's questionable remarks. How do you feel listening to these half-truths and non-facts being from the highest offices of our land being promoted as if they are true, and they are directly impacting the way that the public feels about you? Listen, if you don't tell me that you want to start a war or that you cry yourself to sleep at night, I may call you a liar. I don't think I could handle that. Sincerely, as a man who lives with bipolar disorder, whenever an elected leader says something stupid after a mass shooting, it crushes me. But thankfully that doesn't happen every day. Sincerely, I know I'm speaking for you, and I apologize. I can't get over it. I'm struggling so desperately with it. I want to say you're struggling with it because you haven't lived with this your entire life, right? So I am used to people saying really crazy stuff. Like, you'd be amazed stuff that people say to you directly because they feel like you can. Just look at their article after article, right? What do we call them now? Karens? Isn't that the thing? Just like the one the other day in Central Park with the guy bird watching, right? You listen to that phone call and she's using all the buzzwords. I mean, she did an Oscar-worthy performance that could have led to that man being killed, right? So, people are going to always say things that are mistrue. I'm going to say very simply to your audience, vote, right? Vote. If you don't agree with what is happening, it is our responsibility and our power to get people in office who have our best interest. And we have to continue to read.
We have to continue to read between the lines. And I highly encourage people to have a dialogue with somebody else that can challenge their thinking. And part of the reason, we wanted to talk today was just to talk as friends, right? I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on systematic racism in America. I didn't write any books, but there are a ton of people out there who are. And it's our responsibility to go and find that knowledge and bring that knowledge in. And we can do that. We have the power to do that. So, no, man, I don't cry myself to sleep on that sort of stuff because, there's an election coming up at the end of the year. And, this country is going to decide, where do we want to go in the next 4 years? I'm going to be hopeful that things come together. Let me put it that way.
Okpara, sincerely, I can't thank you for enough. Not surprisingly, we've gone over time, and I could do this for another 5 hours. Sincerely, I want to say to people, Okpara and I, again, we've known each other for a little bit, and we've had lots of conversations about race and civil rights, and I have learned an incredible amount. And I am thankful to you, Okpara, for allowing me to do so, because I got to imagine that I've said some stupid things, and that's what I want to point out. Like, Okpara and I just talk. We just talked about it. He never jumped down my throat. I never jumped down his. We've disagreed. We've certainly disagreed. I think that's one of the things that leads to a good conversation. I would really like to hope that this encourages people on every side of the aisle, every walk of life, every creed, every socioeconomic status, every race, to allow these conversations to happen. And when somebody says something offensive, maybe take a deep breath and try to understand why they believe that. That's been the most helpful for me in mental health advocacy. When people say, oh, well, you're violent, right? You have mental illness. I want to yell, really? You think every single person with mental illness is violent? But I take a deep breath and I explain. And the thing that has helped me grow the most in all of these conversations that our society is thankfully having in many ways for the first time is when I ask a question in a stupid or offensive or off-putting way, people have been patient with me. I feel that's where having a social work degree has really benefited you, Okpara.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okpara, I want to give you closing words. What is the last thing that you have to say to our audience before we ride off into the sunset?
I just want to say people have the power to bring about change. I wrote this the other day in the paper. We help create these systems. We can tear them apart. And now's the time. And we can't wait for other people to do it. And we can do that. So use your voice, use your advocacy, use each other to make that happen. And please have a dialogue with other people and share and go out there and take a risk, and somebody's going to help you learn. But remember, it's not every African American's responsibility to teach you about racism. So again, find some resources as well. And there are plenty out there, but know that people will have this conversation, if you're genuine. And if you're coming from a place of intellectual curiosity and love, but it's not their responsibility to teach you. So remember that.
Okpara, thank you so much for saying that. I cannot agree more. Thank you for being a resource that I've used. Thank you for the books that you have recommended over the years. There's so many great ones. I actually had a list, but rather than reading off the books that Gabe Howard has liked, I will let people find them, because there are some incredible books written by African American authors that I highly recommend. There's some excellent articles out there. Once again, highly recommend. There is so much information on our cell phones, and we use it to watch cat videos. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Psych Central show. If you liked this show, hang on, I feel like I got to do the ending really, really well for the taping. Okpara, thank you again for being here. Are you ready? Are you ready to I say ride off in the sunset? Are you
ready? You got it, man.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this special Facebook Live version of the Psych Central podcast. Please like, subscribe, rank, review, share the live Facebook version of the Psych Central podcast on Facebook to complete the circle. We have our own special Facebook group. You can find it at psychcentral.com/FB show. Check it out, and remember, you can get 1 week of free, convenient, affordable, private online counseling anytime, anywhere, simply by visiting betterhelp.com/psychcentral. And we will see everyone next week. Wave, Okpara, wave!
I'm waving.